Hello, and welcome to this little segment called the Mental Health Toolbox. This is designed by me, so it's not from a professional. This is just me sharing information that's been shared with me in the past, and hopefully it will be useful for others too. Okay, so let's get on with it. What is a mental health toolbox? This is a collection of things. They're not physical things, although I guess they could be. You could have fidget toys and things like that as your physical mental health toolbox items, but they are really things that you use in a mental capacity to help you maintain or manage your mental health. You can also have a mental health toolbox that is designed to spot if you suffer with mental illness of any description. You can use this to spot a decline in your mental health, spot the warning signs, and put things in place to keep you safe during that process. It also helps to keep you and your loved ones safe. I don't mean like people are going to die necessarily. It doesn't have to be that intense, although for some obviously it is. But it's also, safety is not just the extreme end of things. It's also referring to the sort of the managing anxiety, keeping you feeling as happy and healthy as possible during your everyday life. So who can benefit? Well, anyone, in my opinion. Again, obviously everything here is my opinion and learning that I've done over time. It is, a lot of things are backed by research and such like, but don't take this as mental health advice as such, because I'm not qualified to do that. I'm just sort of trying to share things that have helped me. Okay, so you can use these things in your mental health toolbox to just manage everyday stress. So you don't even have to be suffering from a mental illness of any description, because it's customizable to your needs. It could be focused on anxiety, it could be focused on normal everyday stresses and how you deal with them. It really is for everyone, in my opinion. Next, we have general ideas for your mental health toolbox. These can include things like breathing techniques, of which there are many. You can go on YouTube, Google, anywhere, and find probably 50,000 breathing techniques, and they're all designed slightly differently to combat slightly different things. So if you've tried a couple of breathing techniques and they haven't helped in certain situations, maybe try some other ones. I always thought that breathing techniques was a yoga thing or an exercise thing. I didn't realize that it actually had some actual sort of health benefits in terms of managing anxiety, also managing symptoms of things like anxiety and other mental distress. Symptoms can be very physical, so breathing techniques can really help with that. Sorry, we've got the cuckoo. Doo, doo. Doo, doo. It should only go 4 times. It's 4 p.m. There we go. Okay, moving on. Next, we have journaling. I think most people have heard of journaling. A lot of people probably use these techniques. You can, again, it's quite an easy technique to start doing. You can Google, you can YouTube, lots of different journaling techniques out there. Things like brain dumps, where you sit for however long, 5 minutes, whatever it is, and just offload whatever's in the brain. It doesn't have to make sense. No one's checking it. Spelling doesn't have to be right, etc., etc. It's just techniques that you can use to manage whatever's going on in your brain. There are obviously other writing techniques as well, like the brain dump. There are loads of different writing techniques. Again, if you Google them, a lot of productivity books will describe certain writing techniques to help with productivity, and they also are transferable for mental health management as well. Next, we have therapy, the good old therapy, and there are so many different kinds of therapy. If you've had counselling and that hasn't necessarily worked, it might be the counsellor that you had in that situation and a different one might work better for you. It might be that counselling doesn't work for you and a different kind of therapy works better for you. It could be CBT, it could be DBT, it could be ACT, it could be... There's so many different therapies and talking therapies that I recommend just exploring them if you have access, because I know that around the world there's lots of different access points and whatnot. Mind itself, obviously we're here today for Mind, and they have a lot of tools that you can use for therapy, ways to get into therapy, and ways to access therapy that you might not know. Obviously, we've got medication for those that may need it. I think very often we stigmatise medication as something that only mentally ill people use. That's not necessarily true. Life is tough. And even if you are generally mentally healthy, you may need some extra help at times to manage things like anxiety and stress. And there's no shame in it, whether you're mentally ill or in a short space of time. Sorry if you can hear Isabel telling the dog off. Okay, next we have I've labelled some different therapy, like specific targeted therapies like CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. That very much looks at the way you think and the way you process situations and things that have happened. DBT is dialectical behaviour therapy. This one is particularly useful for people with diagnoses such as borderline personality disorder and depression. But again, I've gone through DBT myself, and personally I could see this being used by most people, maybe not all of it. I don't use all of it. I use very specifically, I've found things that work specifically for me. DBT is, it does have some of the CBT elements. It also has mindfulness, but it also provides you practical ways of managing on a day-to-day basis. These are all things that, as with any therapy, take time and practice. Things are not going to change overnight, but luckily our brains have a level of plasticity, and practicing these things are really useful and will help in the long run if you give them the chance to. ACT is acceptance. I should have written this one down because I haven't had a lot of dealings with ACT, but acceptance, hang on, let me Google this one. Okay, continue. Oh no, I didn't want to do that. Acceptance and commitment therapy. This is another form of therapy that's it's a type of psychotherapy, sorry. And again, I haven't had a lot to do with this, but I've heard lots of good things about it, and it may be something that you want to look into for yourself. Mindfulness is the next one. I think a lot of people have heard of this thing called mindfulness, but for me personally, I heard of mindfulness many, many times before I actually learned about it. And I had a very specific idea. I thought it was a bit wishy-washy, a bit, what you do in yoga. I didn't really, I underestimated its power, basically. And there's so much more to mindfulness than what we initially think, in my experience. So I would definitely recommend, again, mindfulness is a really good one for everyday life, right up to ways to maintain mental health for people that are mentally ill too. And then finally on this list, we've got gratitude techniques. This could be literally just thinking, okay, right now I am grateful for, and just using that sentence a couple of times a day, a couple of times a week, whatever works for you. For me, I try and think of at least 3 things every day that I'm grateful for. It sounds like a silly thing that can't really possibly do anything major, but over time it does. Like for me, I'm quite a naturally negative thinker, and over time, the more I've practiced gratitude, the more I've been able to come at life in a more positive way generally. Obviously, there's going to be times that I'm not positive. There are going to be times I trip up and the mind monkeys get me, and etc. etc. It's not about being perfect. It's about managing and just improving life on a day-to-day basis. Next, I've put some of my personal favourite techniques that I use. Some of them I use on a day-to-day basis. So the first one is practice catching and reframing mind monkeys. The key word there is practice. Nothing, like I've mentioned before, nothing happens overnight, and these things are difficult. For however old we are, that's how long we've been practicing the way that we think now. So to change that takes time and may take that much time again, but the more you do it, the more benefit you'll gain from doing these things. So this really is the negative self-talk. For me, it's focusing on that negative self-talk. My confidence isn't always where it could be, and although it is improving overall, there are obviously days that I doubt myself, and I think a lot of people do. Most people probably do to some degree. It's like doubt themselves, maybe don't think of themselves as particularly good at things, or that they're worthy of what they have in life. So these things that we do we talk to ourselves, we spend the most time with ourselves. There's no one else that we spend more time with. So catching these thoughts and trying to reframe them into something a little bit more positive. For example, a thought that I mentioned in the chat with Hope, which I can't remember where on the schedule. Where is this? Okay, so you'll see this later. You'll see the chat with Hope later on today. But I mentioned that a common thought that I have is that I'm lazy, which is not true. I'm not a lazy person. I get tired very easily because I have physical health conditions that mean that I get tired. And they also... the medication that I'm on also encourages aspects like brain fog, so I can't always get my words out very well and things like that. And all of these things, I've learned to recognize that as laziness, which is not true. So if I catch myself, and I probably don't catch myself every time, but I do quite often, if I catch myself saying that to myself, hearing that in my brain, I'll reframe that and say, no, you're not lazy. you are tired today, you need to rest, or you're not lazy, look what you have done today. And I'll list off the things that I have done. And it could be something as minor as I got out of bed and brushed my teeth today. All of these things are wins. On the worst days, if you've managed to do the simplest mundane thing, that is counted as a win, in my opinion. So that's what that is. Challenging the mind monkeys. Sometimes we can't catch and we can't reframe. We're not going to be able to do that all of the time. And sometimes it is possible to just ask. So, for example, I quite often get a little bit paranoid, a little bit worried that I've upset someone, or that someone isn't liking me very much right now, or something like that. I will just ask, if I'm comfortable with them, I will just ask them directly, how do you feel right now? Or have I done something to upset you? I will just ask, because their answer will challenge the mind monkey. The other thing you can do is, going back to the lazy example that I used before, if I'm feeling lazy, because we all feel lazy sometimes, this is a natural thing that humans do have as part of our everyday life, maybe not everyday life, but our lives. And yeah, so if I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm lazy, I will list off the things that I've done that day, and that challenges that thought. Or I will do something, and it doesn't have to be something physical. It can be picking up my book and reading a chapter. It could be just ticking something off my to-do list, sending that email I've been putting off for a while, anything, because any of these things is evidence to the brain, and the brain likes evidence. So instead of spending my time looking for the evidence to support the monkeys, I look for the evidence to challenge the monkeys. Okay, next we have planning ahead where possible. You probably already know this about me. It's probably fairly obvious at this point. I do have challenges with anxiety and PTSD. I struggle a little bit socially. So I often plan ahead. Things that I might say in certain situations, might do in certain situations. Now, this is a fine line, because you can go too far with this and spend too much time planning ahead. But what I've done with this, how I use this technique, is I will give myself a timer and say, right, okay, and I'll write it down, because once it's out of my head, I don't have to think about it anymore. And then if it's a situation like a meeting with someone or a phone call, I've got them notes right there to help me. So that's another technique that I use. The next one is, like we collect books, collect positives and wins. That thing that I said before about the brain likes evidence. This isn't just me talking whatever I want to say. This is something that I've read that's evidence-based. So the brain does like evidence. So when we're stuck in that negative spiral that is quite common with all mental illnesses, probably. Not that I'm qualified to know that, but I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to get at here. I've lost my train of thought. That's useful. Okay. Positives and wins. Okay, so our brains like evidence and collecting them positives. So you might want to write them, have like a notes thing in your notes app. Just any time that you think, oh, that was a win, or that was really cool, or that made me so happy, write it down. And then if you're feeling negative, feeling low, feeling bad in any way, you can always have that to go back to and remind yourself of them lovely moments that we all have, and that we often forget when we're struggling, because that's part of it. The next tactic that I use is practice delaying reactions. Now, this is specifically with negative reactions. I'm quite a hothead. I'm an Aries. I also have Italian heritage. Apparently, these two things make me a bit of a hothead. So it's quite easy for me to sometimes overreact. Sometimes it's a realistic reaction, but I won't know that if I just let myself react all of the time. And again, this has taken a lot of practice, and it still is going to take a lot of practice. I'm not perfect at this. I don't react how I want to react every single time, and I don't think that's realistic either. So you do have to keep these things realistic. But I have found that I very often wait to react to maybe someone said something a bit silly they didn't mean to necessarily, or they might have meant to, but you're not necessarily going to realize that in the moment. You're just going to react. Delaying that reaction will help you react in a way that you can be proud of. It's not about letting people off. It's not about allowing people to treat you badly or anything like that. It's about giving yourself that time to do yourself justice and behave in a way that you want to behave. In this case, it's me, how I want to behave. Okay, and finally on this point, we have regular check-ins to make sure that things are still working well for me, and adapt or change anything that needs changing. I found this really important. So by regular, I don't mean every day or even every week. I mean maybe monthly, maybe every 6 months, maybe a year, depending on how I'm doing in that time. If I'm pretty stable, I do have mental illnesses, so I have to think of how stable my mental illness is at that time, and therefore do I need to change things according to that. If you don't have mental illness, you might only need to check in on these things every year or every couple of years. It's really, again, it depends on you and what you need, and the only person that knows that best is you. And finally, if you are comfortable, let us know in the chat what is something that you either currently use to help, that you maybe didn't think of as a mental health toolbox item, but you could put it in, or something that maybe has stood out to you during this presentation. Yeah, let's chat about it. Only if you're comfortable. Don't share anything that you don't want to be put out there. Obviously, this is a very public forum, and I don't want anyone to feel unsafe or compromised in any way. If you don't want to talk about anything personal, don't do it. I 100% don't want you to, but if you feel comfortable and you want to share, feel free. Thanks for listening. Love you.